many. I will say that communication is a big one as well. My experience is that emotional eaters don't communicate very effectively. We tend to eat what we want to say. So we stuff it, we don't say it. And this is a problem. We're, again, back to that people-pleasing habit.
Cue music. Places, everybody, places. We're starting in 3, 2.
Welcome to the Autoimmune Hour, where we look at the rise of autoimmune disorders. I've brought together top experts that range from doctors, specialists, nutritionists, researchers, and even those recovering from autoimmune to bring you the latest, most up-to-date information about autoimmunity and how to live your life uninterrupted.
Thank you for joining us here on the Autoimmune Hour with Sharon Sayler. Always seek sound legal, medical, and or professional advice regarding any problems, conditions, and any of the recommendations you see, hear, or read here on the Autoimmune Hour, Understanding Autoimmune, and Life Interrupted Radio. Now, we don't want you to worry about taking too many notes, so you can join the Autoimmune Hour's Courage Club, and we'll send you the transcripts and show notes from every episode. Sign up now at understandingautoimmune.com. Now, back to your host, Sharon Sayler.
Welcome, everyone, to the Autoimmune Hour. I'm Sharon Sayler from SharonSayler.com. And tonight, as always, it's just my honor and pleasure to be with you here on another brand new episode. I've got a topic that is so timely, and I have to say, it's not just for us with autoimmune. So listen in, bring your family members around, because I think so many right now can relate to this. And it's the topic of emotional eating. And I think a lot of us are just, what are they calling that? The pandemic 20 or something like that. And after all these months and months, it could be even more than that number. But we're going to talk to the expert on it. Her name is Tricia Nelson, and she's an internationally acclaimed author of Heal Your Hunger, 7 Steps to End Emotional Eating Now. And when I saw her book come across the desk, I was like, absolutely. I was so relating to it because I just find under this kind of stress, and I have to say, it's not as easy for us to exercise. Those of us that have that in our healing regime, it's not that easy for us to exercise anymore and things like that. And gosh, emotions are really high for all of us, whether we're dealing with a diagnosis on top of this or not. So she is also, as I said, an emotional eating expert and a transformational speaker, and she lost 50 pounds by identifying and healing the underlying causes of her emotional eating. She has quite a story that started in her childhood. So let me say hi, Tricia. How are you? Welcome to the show.
I'm doing great, Sharon. Thanks so much for having me.
Awesome. And I love your book. I could really relate to the emotional eating part and the triggers. Now, you talk about your early childhood and how even from a very young age, you attempted to overcome life stresses through food. Do you mind sharing just a little bit of your story and what brought you to the realization is this might be emotional eating?
Absolutely. I, from the get-go, just loved food. Food was a big highlight for me. So I just remember loving to eat, cook. I learned to cook at a young age, play restaurant and serve food to other people and go out to dinner. Like I'd almost have heart palpitations when I knew my family was going to be going out to dinner because I was so excited about all the yummy foods I was going to get to eat. So it was very much an obsession for me. And I ate a lot, and I would overeat. I mean, at a very young age. And I even had, this is kind of strange and sad, but I had a habit of getting sick to my stomach on Sunday evenings. So Sunday evenings, I would end up with my head in the toilet, and my mother, bless her heart, I would wake her up when I was about to vomit, and she'd come to the bathroom with me and I would vomit, and she'd get me some ginger ale. But when I looked back, I started my healing journey, I would look back at that, at like my way of life as a child, and thought, that is really bizarre. What was that about? And I came to see that the weekends was when I was with my family, and there was family stress and there was underlying stuff going on. It wasn't horrible. I love my family, but, there was stuff going on for all of us underneath the surface that nobody was addressing. Nobody had tools for addressing. And I stuffed myself through the weekend, and to the point where I'd be sick to my stomach. So I see that I was very much stuffing emotions at a very young age. And, it was nothing I had occasion to take a look at until my weight really got out of control. So, by age 21, I was 50 pounds overweight and miserable about my weight. So I had this roll in my tummy that I would scrunch up in my hands, and I'd imagine cutting it off. You know how you cut the fat off the side of a steak? So I'm like, well, it's only fat. Like, maybe I could just slice it off, which is insane, I know, but that's how I thought. And I thought,
people do think strange things.
Well, exactly. And I thought about getting a disease. Like, I sort of wished to get some terrible disease where I'd automatically lose weight. Or I thought maybe I'll join the army where I'll be forced to exercise at boot camp. So these are some pretty out there thoughts, but it's really an indication of how desperate I did feel. Like I wasn't in control of my weight. I was careening out of control, and I didn't know what to do about it. So I was resorting to these sort of desperate thoughts, which people who struggle with food and weight do. Like, you just get more and more desperate to get the weight off, but nobody ever stops to look at why we put it on in the first place. And that's really, where my journey took me. Is I was able to heal. I found a mentor who was able to help me go deeper and deal with the underlying causes of my emotional eating. Changed everything for me. I've been in a thin body ever since. That was over 30 years ago, by the grace of God. And, as I began to help others, I really created a system, a very specific system. And that's what's in my book and the work that I do with clients. So now I can show people how to heal in the exact same way I healed. And it's not hocus pocus, or it's not, hit or miss. It's very specific, and it works.
It's very specific, and I enjoyed it. And what I liked about it was going through my own, I was not an emotional eater per se, but, the own traumas of growing up and all sorts of things that you deal with as you get a little bit older and more adult, and you understand these traumas and things from your past. And one of the things that I related in the book was emotional eating sounded very addictive to me. Does it relate at all to addictive personalities?
Absolutely. I really was a food addict, and here's the deal. I really have considered this to be, and I teach that this is a spectrum. So I believe we're all hardwired to have an emotional connection with food. As a baby, we suck on our mother's breast, and that's a very emotional, connecting experience. And we just, going through our lives, we have certain emotions around certain foods, and there's nothing wrong with that.
The holidays coming up and all the emotions and being locked down and in COVID where I'm at, et cetera. It is extremely emotional just realizing you're not going to have a piece of turkey with your parents.
Yeah, absolutely. There's all kinds of new emotions this year, aren't there? But it's a spectrum. So not everybody who is an emotional eater, who might go overboard once in a while on Ben and Jerry's, or just sit with a bowl of popcorn and finish it off during a movie, that's emotional eating. But somebody like me who would do it as a habit and really as a binger, where I'd get a bunch of foods. I get my Hershey's Kisses and my cookies and ice cream and Doritos, and I'd sit down, and of a whole evening, I'd polish all those things off. That's really more in the addictive realm. And so it's really a spectrum. And so I'd say food addicts are emotional eaters, but emotional eaters aren't necessarily, they haven't progressed to the point of being addicted. But either way, if there are consequences that somebody doesn't like, and everybody gets to decide for themselves, that you can't really diagnose somebody else. Really, we have to consider, I always say the spectrum is, the way to consider where you are on that spectrum. And I actually have a quiz on my website where they literally can get a personalized score and find out where they are on the spectrum. But it's really depends on the amount of control someone has to kind of scale back, like, oh, my pants are getting a little tight. I think I'll jog an extra 5 miles, this week, or perhaps I'll cut out the sweets this week. So they have an element of control where they can scale back, they can course correct. versus somebody on the high end of the spectrum that can't. Once they take that first bite of something sweet, they're off to the races and they have to finish the whole bag. And the other thing besides control is consequences. To what degree is your out of control eating affecting your life? Is it affecting you physically? Is it causing or exacerbating some autoimmune issues? Is it causing prediabetes or diabetes? Is it causing you heart issues? Those are physical. Lethargy, depression, anxiety, some of these things can be a physical and emotional. And is it getting in the way of your job? Like, are you just feeling so out of energy or so gross the next day after a binge that you can't show up the way you want to? Or is it getting in the way of your being present with your kids? I hear that a lot from clients. I'm not present with my kids when I'm in the food because all I want to do is put them to bed so I can eat whatever I want to eat. So there's a whole span of consequences. And the greater the consequences, obviously, the greater that somebody is probably a food addict or addicted to food. I mean, these are semantics, but somebody's probably going to reach out for help when they're getting to the point where they can't just control it on their own and the consequences are mounting.
That led me to an interesting question. I'm not sure if this is in your realm or not, but I'm thinking about people that have a thing called SIBO, small intestinal bacterial overgrowth, where sometimes that is almost like that little plant from that movie, feed me, feed me. And sometimes those sorts of things need to be addressed, correct? Before we can address, or as we address the emotional part too. Because I'm thinking about people who have told me, it's like, I know I should stop and I stop, but I just can't, and it turned out to be a combination of some emotion, repressed emotion, and something called SIBO.
No question. And I've had SIBO and I've had candida, systemic candida and different things that are physical, hormonal imbalances that are physical, and they do create cravings for more, so there's no question about it. I like how you sort of adjusted your words and you said, deal with it before, and then you said, as we deal with the emotions, because it really, I believe that doing it in tandem, is probably the best solution. It's sort of like, which came first, the chicken or the egg? Did I eat crappy foods to the point where did I eat enough carbs and sugar to the point where I got candida or SIBO, and therefore then it's asking for more? Or did I get the SIBO problem and now I'm an emotional eater? My experience is it's usually emotional eating. If we did create some of these things, it's not always, sometimes it can be just the condition itself. But usually if we have an unhealthy diet for any length of time, we're going to start getting symptoms, including autoimmune symptoms. And so we have to do both at the same time. We have to start adjusting our diet. But for emotional eaters, that's not so easy to say, stop. You want to get rid of the candida? Stop eating sugar. I got rid of SIBO, stop eating carbs. And that sounds good. But for somebody who is addicted to these foods, who needs these foods for an emotional reason, you have to start addressing their emotions and the idea that they are having these cravings for emotional reasons as well, in order to really have a good integrated approach to overcoming the physical and the emotional problem.
And I just want to point out there are tests that you can take for systemic candida and SIBO if you're thinking, I wonder if it is one or the other or both. And as you point out, oftentimes it is a bit of both. Let's jump in. Well, as I'm looking at the clock here, we're a little bit early, but I want to jump into a really deep topic right after this quick commercial break. So I think we'll take this one just a little bit early and we'll be right back.
Life Interrupted Radio will return after these messages from our sponsors. It's great sponsors like these that keep this show coming to you every week. Be sure and stop by lifeinterruptedradio.com to learn more.
Your conscious lifestyle on steroids. OMTimes Radio. IOM-FM.
Hello, I'm Lisa Berry. Join me every Monday at 1 p.m. Eastern Time for Light on Living. A chance to see new, hear different, and feel more as I shine the spotlight on all the ways to lighten the load of life's challenges. Light on Living is your link to that new way you're looking for, that new understanding that will enhance your life, and that positive connection that will support your growth. So join me and you'll gain insight and start to see things in a new way that motivates you.
OMTimes Magazine is one of the leading online content providers of positivity, wellness, and personal empowerment. A philanthropic organization, their net proceeds are funneled to support worldwide charity initiatives via Humanity Healing International. Through their commitment to creating community and providing conscious content, they aspire to uplift humanity on a global scale. OMTimes, co-creating a more conscious lifestyle.
Listen and imagine. It takes 5 seconds to send a text, and for those 5 seconds, you're driving blind. Life is worth more than a text. Stay alive. Don't text and drive.
Visit StopTextStopWrecks.org, a message brought to you by the National Highway Traffic Safety Administration, Project Yellow Light, Noise, and the Ad Council.
Hi, this is Sharon, and of course you know me from here on the Autoimmune Hour. Maybe you don't know I'm also an author. My latest book is for kids. It's Pinky Chenille and the Rainbow Hunters, a winner of a 5-star Reader's Favorite review. It's perfect for your early reader and a great bedtime story for your young adventurers. Check it out over at pinkychenille.com. That's PinkyChenille.com. See you there. Welcome back, everyone, to the Autoimmune Hour. I'm Sharon Sayler from SharonSayler.com, and tonight we're here with Tricia Nelson, and she's the internationally acclaimed author of Heal Your Hunger, 7 Steps to End Emotional Eating Now. And we've been talking about emotional eating and our emotions, and then also whether is it SIBO or systemic candida or something else plus emotional eating. Now, let's jump right in, as I want to make sure we have plenty of time. Can you go over some of the simple steps so we can, I think the big thing is to figure out after the testing, then what next? Because oftentimes with medical professionals, I found they really don't get into that emotional eating part. They just say, no, yes or no, check the box.
Yeah, absolutely. And as we were talking about earlier, it's not so easy to just clean up your diet, and if somebody has trouble doing that, they've got to start dealing with, why they were having that crappy food in the first place. And
from my childhood, I remember this from a couple of aunties that if I fell or scraped a knee or whatever, it was, here, have a cookie, you'll feel better.
Totally. We're so conditioned to use sweets as a reward. There's no question. And so as adults, we do the same thing. Gee, I've had a long work week. I'm going to sit in front of the TV with my favorite ice cream. We do that, and it becomes habitual. So again, just to clean up our diet isn't so easy when we're in the habit of always eating something sweet after we have our meal, or sitting in front of the TV always with food, something to munch on or crunch on. So that whole way of living has to change. And that's very hard to do without support. So I will say one of the simple steps in my process is community, and having community, a community of emotional eaters. And it's so important to do that, because we're talking about a lifelong habit for many people, something that has been, totally ingrained in us for so long. I mean, for myself, I was depending on food, as you heard, from so young, food was how I coped with uncomfortable emotions and out of control, experiences. That's not something I'm going to turn around on my own. I've got to lock arms with other people who get what it's like to be powerless over a cookie. Because most people who are well-meaning but don't have the problem, they'll say things to us like, oh, just moderate your sweets, or moderate your intake of carbs, or just, exercise more, eat less, exercise more. That's kind of what the doctors tell us, as if we haven't thought of that.
I find that's true with food sensitivities, and we've had people on that are food sensitivities experts, and I hold my hand up with someone that has numerous food sensitivities, and one of them is gluten, and you can have just a bite of the birthday cake.
Yeah, no, it doesn't always work that way. So it's really important to be around people who get that that's easier said than done, because there's camaraderie in that, and there's support in that. And all my programs I do in a group setting. I don't do the one-on-one, because people get so much from each other, and realizing, oh my God, I'm not the only one who does crazy things with food. I'm not the only one who spends all day thinking about what they're going to eat next, and so that's very healing in and of itself to have that camaraderie. So it's really, really important to have that. In terms of other things people can do to turn the boat around is to also have a way to replace the excess food, because just taking food away from an emotional eater, and I don't mean all food, of course we have to eat, but I mean all the ooey gooey chewy foods that we prefer to eat, just removing that from the diet is going to be a very short-lived solution, because we've got this big empty hole inside. And we're like, what are we going to fill that hole with? I need my snacks. And so it's really important to realize not only obviously what food is doing to us, but also what food is doing for us. And this is something people don't really think about. And so I'm going to talk to you about the Pep Formula, which is a really important way of starting to understand what this emotional connection with food really is about. And PEP is an acronym that stands, the first piece stands for painkiller. So when I mentioned what food's doing for us, food kills pain. Emotional pain. Like food just softens all those sharp edges of life. And this is why during COVID, people are realizing they're an emotional eater like way more than ever, because, the idea of a pandemic where we have to be quarantined and not see our families for the holidays, that's a sharp edge. That's up leveling life to a whole new kind of red alert level. And it's scary. I mean, certainly in March, it was very scary, and we didn't know what was up. And so we used food to really mitigate our feelings. So P in the PEP stands for painkiller, because we want to kill emotional pain. The E in PEP stands for escape. And again, no better time to want to escape the reality of living than during COVID. And so we use food as a way of just sort of numbing out. And so sitting in front of the TV with our favorite goodies is a great way to just check out and just be like, this isn't really happening. Like this new reality is not happening. I'm just going to escape in food and TV, which again, everybody's doing these days. And so but that's another way that food is serving us beyond our nutritional need. And the last P in PEP, Sharon, stands for punishment. And this is something that people don't really think of, because we think of
punishment.
Yes. See, we don't think of food as a form of punishment because we use it as a reward and it feels good and it's something good to look forward to. But for the emotional eater who eats the food, as a form of painkiller and escape, but then goes overboard and stuffs themselves to where they feel sick and they've got crumbs down their shirt or ice cream, droplets down their shirt, and they're stuffed and they feel gross and they pass out on the couch. And the next day they don't want to be on Zoom. They take their video off, because their face is bloated, and so that's something we've just done to ourselves. And it begs the question, why would we basically abuse our bodies with the food? Why would we do that? And it's really because of underlying guilt. Okay. And this is something we don't think of, but emotional eaters have buried a lot of feelings. And one of them is a feeling of guilt. Maybe in our past, we had sexual abuse that we feel very ashamed about, or there are things we've done ourselves that we don't feel good about and had no way of coping with. Or we say that, when we're feeling fat and gross, we end up snapping at our kids or our husband, and then we feel bad about that, but we haven't properly addressed it or apologized for it. So we just beat ourselves up with food. And this guilt has to be addressed. So to review, we use food as a painkiller, a form of escape, and as a form of punishment to kill pain, fear and worry, and guilt. And so we have to address the shame and the fear and worry and guilt and pain, because that's how we're going to heal. But that's just that PEP formula is kind of nice because people can kind of start, first people are like, I just like food. I'm not eating over my emotions. That's ridiculous. But I think after listening to this show, they're going to start tuning in a little bit to why do I go to the refrigerator 20 times of an evening? Like, what am I looking for? And these are kinds of the things, the kinds of things we're actually looking for. So we're just making those little connections. People can use the PEP formula to start digging in a little bit and seeing what's really going on.
Well, absolutely. And a lot of what we're talking about is what I'll call past traumas, things that were big changes in our life that caused us to, whether I had one professional on who said either the capital T or the lowercase t traumas doesn't matter. They're all the same. They're all a trauma. But one of the things that I've noticed during COVID, Tricia, is that it's a way of killing pain just of the current situation. So it's like, as we're muddling through this trauma, this worldwide trauma.
Yes.
That a lot of us are just because we can't be with friends and eating. Sometimes I'll eat more when I'm alone than I am with friends.
Yeah.
You know? And since we're not doing that, we're just sitting at home, whether we're in front of the television, the kitchen's right there, the refrigerator's right there, etc. It seems to be much easier to soothe our emotions because it's so handy right now.
It is so handy. It's crazy. You know, the food's right there and it calls to us when we're stressed out or we have a phone call that didn't go right or, you know, whatever. It's right there. We don't have the distraction of the workplace or other people at work or having the kitchen be downstairs, you know, so it is.
That I'm doing a lot now that I've had to watch is just actually when I said, let's do a Zoom tea together. I haven't seen you in so long. And then you have a couple of those a day. Pretty soon so anymore, I just stick to the tea.
Yes, that's a better way to go.
It was so easy to just have the opportunity to sit there and, you know, oh, what did you make? Oh, what did you make?
Yeah, cooking is, I think, become more central to people's lives right now, just because it's like one of the few forms of entertainment people have at their fingertips.
Absolutely, and it's so socially acceptable in so many ways.
Yes,
oh my
exactly.
God. Absolutely. Well, so we've got the PEP formula in our minds of what it is, and I'm curious when you said the last one, and we were punishment. You mentioned about sort of personal guilt, personal shame. What part does play in that once we've gained the 50 pounds? When you were mentioning that, outside bullying came to my mind, fat shaming and this sorts of things.
Yeah.
That seems, I'm no expert like you are, but it seems to almost exacerbate the problem instead of somehow guilting someone into stopping. I mean, I'm a little confused about that.
Yeah, I mean, I don't think, for me personally and for so many of my clients, just knowing what you're doing to yourself and knowing that you don't look good because you've put on so much weight, that doesn't often do the trick for getting us motivated enough to stop. Because again, it's something we're so emotionally tied to. We can't just turn on a dime and say, okay, that's it. I feel bad. I'm going to do something about it. Like, unfortunately, we live in a lot of misery before we get to that place of being sick and tired of being sick and tired. And, you know, other people's opinions or judgments of us, it just makes us hide out more. I've heard, you know, clients say, I don't want to go to Thanksgiving. I don't want to, you know, be with my family for the holidays because I don't want to be judged. Now, I will say most of the time we're judging ourselves a lot more than anybody else is judging us. And we fear judgment, whether or not it's actually happening. So a lot of it is our own projections because we're judging ourselves so harshly. But, you know, we do have family members that, I had a grandmother who used to, every time I'd see her, she'd go, she was an old English woman, and she'd go, oh, seem to have gotten put some weight on, haven't you? Like, she'd just she'd blurt out this comment about my weight every time I would see her. She came to our house like 3 times a year. And I just hated it. I hated seeing her for the first time. She'd always give me some kind of evaluation of my weight.
As if you weren't aware of it.
I know. It's like, hello. So it is a hard thing, but it doesn't motivate us. If anything, it demotivates us, and we just want to hide out, you know, wear black spandex and just make sure we don't ever run into those people again.
Yeah, unfortunately, that's what I was thinking, that when we were talking about that punishment, it's not just our own internal punishment, but gosh, in our culture, there is a lot of external punishment as well for it.
No question. It's not a good culture to be overweight in.
So let's talk a little bit about some of the 7 steps to ending emotional eating that we need to dive into.
Yes. So one of the most important ones is what I call centering or centeredness. You know, so much of the time we're eating out of stress. You know, we're basically stress eating. And so it's really, really important that we reduce our stress, because emotional eaters, in my experience, overeaters are overdoers. And so we get much of our validation from outside of ourselves by kudos from others. And
overeaters are overdoers. Wow.
Yeah, no question. It goes hand in hand because we want to be liked. We want to be validated. We want people to notice us, and it all stems from not having the self-esteem that we wish we had or that we should have. And that was true for me. I mean, I grew up in a good home, but I did not have a solid foundation of self-worth, and so much of my self-worth I got from being a human being a human doing instead of a human being. And so the problem with that is when I'm doing too much and I'm putting a lot on my plate, so to speak, I'm stressed out, I'm taxing my adrenals, I'm tired, and also I'm resentful because when we're doing for other people out of people pleasing, we end up feeling very unsatisfied because nobody's ever as pleased as we plan on them being.
Oh, true.
Right? So that people pleasing is a whole nother thing. But the bottom line is we have to reduce our stress. And so one of the steps of the seven simple steps is self-care and really starting to take time for ourselves every single day. And this is not easy for overdoers. Okay. So overdoers, they just jump out of bed and they're checking their phone and they're answering email and they're running off to, do something. And that's just not a healthy way to live. I mean, the healthy way to live is to take time in the morning to fill our cup, and then to work from that full cup. And, my experience, I call it your spiritual bank account. So you have to put money in your spiritual bank account in order to have something to take withdrawals from later in the day. And we haven't filled up our spiritual bank account. We're on empty by 4:00 in the afternoon. And guess what we're reaching for? Chocolate and sugary foods, and snacky foods. And so it's really important that we create this resource within ourselves because it has no side effects, drawing on our spiritual sustenance, and that spiritual food that we've fed ourselves first thing in the morning by prayer, by meditation, by spiritual readings, by going for a walk in nature. These things fill our cup, and that it's from that place that we can begin to do for others. And there's nothing wrong with doing for others, but not, as a form of getting, but as a form of being. And that form of being is an outgrowth of having fed ourselves first thing in the morning. So this self-care, and creating a routine first thing in the morning is absolutely vital for a healthy life and for not overeating. Because otherwise, again, when we're on empty all the time, we're using food to sustain us, excess food and unhealthy foods.
Yeah, I almost think of that, as you mentioned, the 3-4 o'clock lull. And oftentimes it was when I was doing it around the sugary foods, as you mentioned.
Yeah.
Sort of that extra starter fluid to restart the engine.
Yep. The quick energy.
Yep,
coffee as well.
And what surprised me about it, as I began to recognize the pattern of it, was not so much about the sugar, except I was addicted to that quick rush that happened. All of a sudden, that wave of energy that came back over me. But I found a couple hours later, I was absolutely exhausted, wanting to close my eyes like at 5 and 6 p.m. It was, once I saw that pattern, I'm like, okay, let's rethink this because it's not working.
Yeah, no, the highs and lows. I mean, sugar makes us high and then we have a huge crash. And that's, that blood sugar roller coaster ride is so unhealthy, and creates so many problems in our bodies.
I know. And we have to be careful with the autoimmune condition is regulating our energy. And so one of the things that I like to do is gratitude in the morning. It's very similar to a meditation, but it's about what am I grateful for, including this amazing body and how it's beautifully working. And I know, guys, even with the diagnosis, there's always things you can be grateful for, is how the body is optimizing, healing, continuing to get stronger every day for you, and always showing gratitude to your body that way. I found that very helpful, was acknowledging my own body.
Oh, I love that. Yeah, that's beautiful. Yeah, what we focus on grows. So when we acknowledge our body and all the wonderful things it's doing for us without our even asking, it just, it's like we're praising it and it gets to do that even more and without any issues. It's like plants. When we talk and say nice things to plants, the plants flourish.
Absolutely. I don't see that we're that much different than, but at the beginning of the diagnosis, there were some days that it was just wake up in the morning and thank the body for making me to take another breath and wake up the next morning, or getting my feet on the floor. And now here we are, further down in this process and so much different. And that's, I think, the important part, is be able to remember gratitude as well as doing your meditations and your centering and grounding. One of my favorites to do any time of day is go for a walk in nature. It doesn't have to be just in the morning. It can be any time,
You bet.
especially evening. It's a nice way to get yourself ready for evening and downtime as well. So that's a great one. Let's see, we got about 20 minutes left, so I want to take our final quick commercial break, and then we'll get into some of the other 7 simple steps that we can do. We'll be right back.
Your conscious lifestyle on steroids. OMTimes Radio. IOM FM.
Change and growth are part of natural life, and also part of your spiritual life. Everyone needs support and guidance, especially during life passages. Upgrade yourself with the OMTimes Experts program. With OMTimes Experts, you have access to the best intuitive coaches, spiritual teachers, counselors, astrologists, and oracles. Our team was carefully selected so you can trust. Find out more at experts.omtimes.com.
Grab a cup of tea or a glass of wine and tune in for Inspired Conversations with publisher Linda Joy on Tuesdays at 2 p.m. Eastern. Linda creates sacred space for leading female luminaries, empowering authors, heart-centered female entrepreneurs, coaches, and healers. A soulful venue where guests openly share the fears and obstacles they've overcome, wisdom and lessons learned, and the personal journey that led them to the transformational work they do in the world. Inspired Conversations to empower you on your path to authentic, soulful living.
Research shows we apologize up to 10 times a day, and most of the time, we say sorry as a response to someone else's mistake. What if we thanked people instead of all that unnecessary apologizing? So instead of saying, sorry, I'm rambling, you say, thank you for listening. Join us at projectforgive.com, a free, non-religious resource on global forgiveness.
Welcome back, everyone, to the Autoimmune Hour. I'm Sharon Sayler from SharonSayler.com, and tonight I'm here with Tricia Nelson, and she's an internationally acclaimed author of Heal Your Hunger, 7 Simple Steps to End Emotional Eating Now. And we've been talking about emotional eating, and especially during this time of the upcoming holidays and COVID and all of these sorts of things that seem to even trigger us that may not have said, oh, I'm not an emotional eater. And all of a sudden we're finding ourselves, well, maybe we are right now. So what are some of the other simple steps we can begin, and questions we can ask ourselves to find out, is this going to be a temporary thing, or am I starting down a dangerous path of this new pattern of emotional eating?
Well, one of the steps, Sharon, is something I call clean eating. And this is really the only part where I tell people a little bit about how to eat. Otherwise, my experience is anybody who struggles with food and weight, they've been studying this for a long time. They've taken lots of courses. They've listened to all kinds of podcasts. They're not ill-informed, that vegetables and good healthy protein is good for you. Good healthy fats, good for you. Ice cream and potato chips, bad for you. So they got the memo. So what I do is I focus more on eating in a way that allows you to start accessing your emotions. So it's not a diet. It's really a way of eating so that you can start getting acquainted with your emotional self, because we've spent so many years running from our emotional selves, not wanting to know what our emotions are. So I call this 3-meal magic, which is eating 3 meals with nothing in between. And this is a beautiful way, first of all, it just kind of like stopping the runaway train. Okay. The runaway train of snacking and just wandering into the kitchen at any time of the day or night. Just 3 meals, just stick to 3 meals. Don't even get real strict about what those meals are. I mean, just stick to those 3 meals. And that's going to be eye-opening right there, because in between meals, you're going to realize how much of a snacker you are and how much you're always wandering into the kitchen and be like, wow, what's going on there? And so sticking to 3 meals is a big deal in and of itself and can really be life-changing. I've had people tell me when they read my book, it just changed their life, because just that alone, eating 3 meals is really something will change their lifestyle and their relationship with food. But it really is a way of getting more acquainted. When you do have cravings in between meals, you can start to realize that that's often emotional hunger, not physical hunger. Because if you have eaten a healthy breakfast with good fats and good protein, then guess what? If you're wanting to eat at 10 a.m., you can have a conversation with yourself like, gee, you had a good breakfast. You're probably not as starving as you're telling yourself you are. What's really going on? And you can take that pause where you can start wondering what those emotions are. And you can also speak to that part of you that gets afraid of not being fed. I find that emotional eaters have sort of an instinctual fear, almost a life and death fear of going hungry. So dependent on food that we panic if we don't have food and if we feel any physical hunger at all. And so we can sort of talk to that panicky self and say, it's okay, you're going to get fed at lunchtime. Like, you're not going to starve. Another meal is coming. Whereas when we're doing the fasting thing and we're really into fasting, that can trigger some of that life and death panic, which is why I like 3 meals, because it's just sort of a gentle way of treating our bodies, where your body gets to know another meal is coming. There's no need for panic. There's no need for shoring up by overeating at a meal. So it serves so many functions, but I really love it because it makes it very clean, like when I'm supposed to eat and when I'm not supposed to eat. So if I'm in a grocery store and they're offering samples, I'm probably not doing right now with COVID, but anytime there's some snacky foods around for me to reach for, if it's not mealtime, that's not my food. So it makes it very clear, and I don't sit there and equivocate for 5 minutes. Should I? Shouldn't I? I think I should, or I think I have it coming to me. I think I deserve this. All that noise in our heads around whether to eat or not to eat, and all the rationalizations that we're so good at telling ourselves, it just clears that right off the table. If it's not mealtime, it's not your food. Bottom line.
About mealtime, that's great. Bottom line. Although I read a lot about the idea of not eating after a certain time of night or having a certain span of hours between meals. And this 3 meal plan, I like how simple it is. But are there things like, do we need breakfast at a specific time and then so many hours before lunch?
I don't think so necessarily. I mean, intermittent fasting is a big deal right now. Everybody's kind of trying it. And I find that it's wonderful on paper, but if somebody's an emotional eater, going 16 hours without eating will set off those red alerts sometimes, or people will use intermittent fasting because they're so out of control with food, they have to sort of close down, like lock the door on the kitchen and fast in order to not go overboard with food. And I know there's a better way. Like, you don't have to be afraid of eating. You don't have to be afraid that once you eat, you're going to overeat, because there's a solution for emotional eating. So to answer your question, I don't think that there's a specific time or day. Like, I tell my clients, do 3 meal magic, but find the timing that works for you, because some people aren't hungry first thing in the morning. And if not, fine, eat your breakfast at 10. And it's great to put at least 12 hours between your dinner and breakfast. So kind of the beginning of the intermittent fasting cycle, no problem. It's just that going longer can be a setup for the emotional eater. For other people who can handle it, great health benefits, but oftentimes emotional eaters use intermittent fasting as a way of losing weight. So they're in that diet mentality, which always backfires, because they end up making up for it. But it also does cause binging a lot of the time once they open up that window and start eating. So I let's say, just do 3 meals. Even if you start a little bit later in the day, put 4 or 5 hours between each meal. Yeah. And be done by 6 or 7. And that's a very healthy way of being.
Wow. That's what I was curious about. I've read about the other, and I haven't had to do it, but I was interested in how your 3 meal plan works. Now, what's another one we can do?
So many. I will say that communication is a big one as well. My experience is that emotional eaters don't communicate very effectively. We tend to eat what we want to say. So we stuff it. We don't say it. And this is a problem. We're, again, back to that people pleasing habit. We don't want to piss anybody off. We don't want to ruffle any feathers. And God forbid anybody be mad at us. So we tend to just smile and just say everything's fine and I'm good and I'm fine with that, right? But then we're burning inside with resentment and we're pissed off because bottom line is because we didn't say what was on our mind, and we're the only ones to blame. And so I teach my clients how to speak up, how to say what they mean what they say, and not say it mean. And so because that burning inside, that, swallowing our feelings is so unhealthy and can lead to so many more health issues and even cancer. And so it's so important that we start expressing ourselves. And one of the self-care secrets I talked about earlier is writing. And so we can start by writing our feelings out. If we're afraid to confront a situation or a person, write it out first. Write out what you would say if you had the chance, and don't hold back. Use all the swear words you want, just write it out, get those feelings out. And then what'll happen is that you'll calm down. Your emotions will settle down and they'll no longer be so fiery. But then you've done it in a safe way where you've gotten it out of yourself. You've gotten the toxins out, and then you've settled down, the heat is gone. And then you can think more rationally and think about what you really feel and what you really would like to say. And you can't do this in all situations. Sometimes you got to be, quick on your feet, during a situation. But it's hard for emotional eaters to do that and to really speak up. So writing is a good way to start understanding what you really feel and then how you might want to say it. You could even write out what you would say, what thing that's not mean or angry that you really want to say to address a situation. So that's sort of good training wheels for somebody. But we have to start communicating. Another thing emotional eaters do is we expect people to be able to read our minds. So we're always like, we don't.
And they don't, Tricia?
No, not unless we give them a script. Okay. So my ex-husband used to say, but you didn't give me I would have done it, but if you just give me a script, either give them a script or communicate, and just say what you need. And it's so, so important. Even if people aren't willing to give us what we need, it doesn't matter. The fact that we say it and stand for ourselves is so, so important, because all that resentment and all that buried emotion is just unhealthy. And it feels so good to realize that we matter. So much of the time we don't say what we need because we don't think we matter. We don't think what we need and how we feel or what we have to say really matters. So we keep quiet. And that's just the furthest thing from the truth. We're each one of God's children and one of God's favorite baby daughters, as I say. So we deserve to have our feelings. We deserve to express them.
Oh, absolutely. We've had Sarah Payton on the show before. And if you haven't checked out those interviews I've done with Sarah, check them out, everyone, because they're awesome. And one of the things that she talks about is this little internal radar, Tricia, that goes around in our head. And the two questions it's always asking is, first is, am I okay? Am I safe? And if you're safe and you answer yes to that, then it's asking, do I matter? Do I matter? And I find that there's so much that you just said there that relates to how Sarah made me aware of this question of everybody wants to know that they matter. And one of the things that in my communication work I want to just address for a moment is when we have those touchy feelings and we've written it out, we've gotten it out that way, find a nice safe place, even if it's talking to a tree, your pet, maybe you do have a close friend you can say anything to. And say that to them, warn your friend. You don't have to warn the tree or the pet, but warn your friend. And say it out loud and say it several times, because the emotion begins to fade the more you say it. And so when you're ready to talk to the other person, it's not a confrontation. It comes without that snarky tone or that emotion behind it or the crying or whatever you don't want to have happen. And so I think some of that practice is really good.
Absolutely. So important.
Now we're down. Our time flies, Tricia. This is such an important topic for us, and especially now for a lot of us. I think the tabulation on emotional eaters is probably statistically skyrocketed during this time. But we're down to just about the last 8 minutes. Please share with us some final thoughts that people can put into action now. And then also your website, how we can find out more about you, and your book. Where can we get your book?
Wonderful. So yeah, regarding the holidays coming up, it's really important to realize that these are just another day. Okay. And that's how I like to approach it. And Hanukkah and Christmas, these are just days of the week where they've been named holidays. And yes, there is spiritual significance, and that's important to recognize, but it's not about the food. And the more you can focus on what it's really about, which sounds nice, but of course we make it about the food anyway. What helps me kind of as a few hacks is to focus on the people. Like really focus on the people. If you are actually physically getting together with people, get really curious about what's going on with them. Ask questions. People love to talk about themselves. And as they do, and as you pay attention, it'll help, take your mind off of the food and what you want to eat next. So that's something that always helps me. And also it works great with children, because children are such beautiful examples of God. And as you ask them questions about what they're up to and what it's like going to school on Zoom and how they're getting together with friends or what they're doing to keep busy. Their perspective on life is so refreshing and wonderful. So the more we get out of ourselves and that noise in our minds and get curious about people, especially older people, and asking them how they're doing, the better. And we can also do things like hosting a Zoom party. We can get some people together for a gathering on Zoom. It's just easy. I think during holiday time, it can be hard, and maybe even more this year, because self-pity is nipping at our coattails. Like, oh, I don't get to be with my family. Oh, I don't get to travel. Oh, I have to stay inside all the time. I mean, it goes on. And those thoughts are poison to us, because it'll lead to eating, where we comfort ourselves because we made ourselves feel so bad. So trying to keep it positive, trying to get into the hearts and lives of other people, that's going to keep our mind off of food. But always at the end of the day, just remember it's another day, and another day to spread light and love. For final thoughts, I would just say, don't try to do this on your own. If you really do struggle with food and weight, I know the tendency is to say, what's wrong with me? I should be able to do this on my own. I should be able to just pull myself up by the bootstraps. But you're dealing with an addiction that is the hardest of all addictions to overcome, in my experience. For me, I started overeating from a very young age. Most people who use food or drugs and alcohol at least had some emotional development till like 13 or 14 when they started abusing alcohol and drugs. But for emotional eaters, we usually started at a very young age, and we usually started in response to trauma. So don't think that, you're weak or lazy or something if you can't get a hold of your food problem. This is something we can't just stop doing. Like alcohol and drugs, you can just stop. With alcohol, you can put the plug in the jug, but it doesn't work that way with food. We have to eat 3 times a day. And I often say you have to actually open the cage, take the, guide the tiger out of the cage, pet the kitty 3 times a day, and then put it back in the cage without getting your ass torn off. So it's really hard. So don't think you can do this on your own. Reach out for help. Help is available. People can reach me through my website, which is healyourhunger.com, HEAL, healyourhunger.com. And there is, as I mentioned earlier, a quiz where you can find out if you're an emotional eater or a food addict and what you can do about it. It's a free quiz. It takes like 3 minutes to do, and you'll get a personalized score. And then also I have a Facebook group called The Secret Sauce to End Emotional Eating. It's a free group you can join, and you can hear my podcast, my live podcast that I record there, and you get all the announcements of what I'm up to and how I can help you. So I definitely invite people to join that. And then Instagram as well at Tricia Nelson __ at the end of the N, Tricia Nelson _ on Instagram.
Awesome. Now, where do we find your book? How do we get?
Oh yeah. The book you can get through my website. There's a link, but it'll take you to Amazon. So you can go straight to Amazon and just look up Heal Your Hunger, 7 Simple Steps to End Emotional Eating. And you can get the Kindle, you can get the actual book, or you can get it on Audible as well. I just recorded it on Audible as well.
Oh, how exciting. Exciting. Well, everyone, that's Tricia Nelson, and the book is called Heal Your Hunger, 7 Simple Steps to End Emotional Eating Now. And as you can tell, she's very knowledgeable about this subject that we all need right now for sure. Maybe you're saying, I don't need it, but I can guarantee you probably know someone who does.
Right.
Be sure and check it all out. And thank you so much, Tricia, for bringing this important topic up to our conscious mind so we can pay more attention to it, especially during the holidays. I find that it's so easy because and these holidays right now where we're asked to stay apart is so much of our social circles are around food and holidays. And there's a lot of emotional meanings to very specific types of pieces of food.
Absolutely.
Your grandma's favorite fig Newtons or something. I don't know. But whatever that comes to mind. I see pictures in my mind. I don't know the names of the particular cookies, but those always come to mind. So everyone, as I said, Tricia Nelson, Heal Your Hunger, 7 Simple Steps to End Emotional Eating Now. Have a great week, and please stay safe. As I like to say, stay safe, stay sane, and have some great adventures. Join me next week for another brand new episode. And also join us over at Facebook for Understanding Autoimmune, there on Instagram and Twitter as well, Understanding Autoimmune. And all the previous episodes are over at understandingautoimmune.com. Thank you so much. Enjoy.
The information provided on the Autoimmune Hour, Understanding Autoimmune, and Life Interrupted Radio, including the websites understandingautoimmune.com and lifeinterruptedradio.com, plus social media, is for educational purposes only. What you read, hear, and see on the Autoimmune Hour, Understanding Autoimmune, and Life Interrupted Radio, and its websites, and other media outlets is based on experience only. The information should never be used for any legal, diagnostic, or treatment purposes. Always seek sound legal, medical, and or professional advice regarding any problems, conditions, and any of the recommendations you see, hear, or read here on the Autoimmune Hour, Understanding Autoimmune, and Life Interrupted Radio. Life Interrupted Radio will return after these messages from our sponsors. It's great sponsors like these that keep this show coming to you every week. Be sure and stop by lifeinterruptedradio.com to learn more.
Hi, this is Sharon, and of course you know me from here on the Autoimmune Hour. Maybe you don't know I'm also an author. My latest book is for kids. It's Pinky Chenille and the Rainbow Hunters, a winner of a 5-star Reader's Favorite review. It's perfect for your early reader and a great bedtime story for your young adventurers. Check it out over at pinkychenille.com. That's PinkyChenille.com. See you there. Do you want to be a better leader? Have better relationships? Become more self-aware? Be a better communicator? Hi, I'm Sharon Sayler, best-selling author, professional speaker, and executive coach. And my life passion is empowering professionals to be the best that they can be. After years of working with professionals, I've discovered the 7 things nobody is telling you that can cost you your clients, sales, and even your career. And I want to give it to you free. You've heard my show, you know my passion, and maybe we'll be working together sooner rather than later. So go grab this ebook now to find out the 7 things that's costing you big time over at SharonSayler.com/radio gift.